Here we go. Humanities 101 and Nachos reminds you that you are enough. Now we join Dr. Dutch with the neuro-affirming conversation hour for outreach and support.
I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Welcome back, Nacho Knots, to another episode of Nachos, the neuro-affirming conversation hour for outreach and support. I am so glad that you're here with me. And I'll be honest, this is one of those weeks when I find myself retreating back to my safe food texts. And for me, that's Tolkien. The books, the films, the soundtracks. They're the stories that let me breathe again when the world feels overwhelming. There's something about the steadiness of the journey of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit that give me the rhythm to hold on to. And this particular exchange between Frodo and Gandalf is one I carry with me often. It reminds me that none of us choose the times we live in, but all of us can choose how to live within them. That's part of what we do here every week. We gather together to take a breath, to share our chips of truth and our tips of resilience, and to remind one another that none of us are walking these paths alone. Life, whether in higher education, in our workplaces, or just in our own minds and bodies, can feel like a set of steep steps, too high, too demanding, too exhausting. And sometimes it feels like we are being given scraps of access instead of a true welcome. But here at Nachos, we reframe that struggle. We remind ourselves that our worth does not come from how high we climb or how well we fit into someone else's design. Our worth is already here. It's already ours. And today we're going to connect Tolkien's wisdom with the metaphors from J. Timothy Dolmage's academic ableism. We'll look at the steep steps that symbolize exclusion and the retrofits that patch problems without really changing them. And then we'll imagine what it means as Nacho Knots to go beyond the retrofit toward a future that is built for us, with us, from the very beginning. We'll also talk about how this connects with the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference coming on October 24th and how your work this semester can ripple out beyond the classroom. So as we begin, I invite you to pause, take a moment, notice your breath, and to let your shoulders loosen, to let yourself settle into this space. You've chosen to be here in this time with this community, and that choice matters. The time is given, yes, but together we can decide how to use it. This semester, our shared work in Nachos and the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference begins with the simple but profound recognition. The institutions we move through were never neutral. The classrooms, the campuses, even the schedules and assignments carry with them assumptions about who belongs and who does not. J. Timothy Dolmage's academic ableism, disability in higher education, names these truths with clarity, giving us metaphors and stories that help us see how deeply ableism has been built into the foundations of higher education. For us, this book is more than a reading assignment. It's a companion, a guide, and a mirror. It shows us where the barriers are, but it also offers us ways to imagine new paths forward. Dolmage begins his first chapter with a set of steps, huge, imposing stairs at a Polytechnic institute that once stood as a postcard image of pride. The stairs, or the approach, did not just lead to the university. They stood as a symbol, broadcasting the idea that higher education was reserved for those who could climb, those with the strength and stamina to ascend. And for everyone else, the message was clear: you do not belong here. Even when the physical steps crumble, the ideology of the steps and the steepness of the steps still remains, replicated in admissions policies, in grading systems, in faculty hiring, and in everyday classroom practices. The steps remind us that the university has long been built on exclusion. But Dolmage does not stop with the image of the steps. He shows how universities were historically intertwined with other institutions: prisons, asylums, immigration stations, all places that sorted people, marked them, and often locked them away. Universities, he suggests, are not separate from these systems, but a part of the same story. Higher education has been imagined as the opposite of disability, a place of perfection and merit. While people with disabilities were studied, institutionalized, or erased. The steep steps become a metaphor for this entire system, a structure designed to elevate some while keeping others out of view. For those of us who identify as neurodivergent or disabled, this image may feel painfully familiar. The steep steps we encounter are not always made of stone. Sometimes they are the long forms that we are asked to fill out just to provide and prove we deserve a simple accommodation. Sometimes they are the rigid attendance policies that punish our nervous system when we need rest or respite. Sometimes they are the professors or peers who see flexibility as a weakness or pity instead of as equity and care. Each of these steps whispers the same message: you do not belong here. And yet Dolmage's metaphor helps us see that these are not personal failures on our part. They are architectural choices, built and reinforced by institutions that claim to prize knowledge while walling off whole ways of being and whole ways of knowing. The gift of this chapter is that it helps us name the steps for what they are. Once we see them clearly, we are less likely to internalize their message. The struggle is not proof that we are inadequate. It is evidence that the design itself was never meant for all of us. And once we name this and call it for what it is, we can begin to imagine new designs. We can picture the classroom not as a staircase to be conquered, but as a table where every brain has a seat. In the context of the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference, Dolmage's words remind us why we gather. The conference is not just a day of sessions and speakers, it's an act of resistance against the steep steps and a declaration that access and belonging should not be an afterthought or an add-on. They should be the very ground upon which we build community. And in Nachos here, when we come together to share stories, reflections, and strategies, we are building those new blueprints in real time. We are practicing what it means to make space. Space that affirms, space that welcomes, and space that values difference as essential. The lesson we carry forward is this: the steps are real and they're steep, but they're not the only path. Together, we're learning to build ramps, to open doors, and to invite each other to the table. We're learning to see exclusion not as the natural order of things, but as a design choice that can be questioned, challenged, and even changed. And in that recognition, we begin to climb not the steps of elitism, but the steps of solidarity. Now, in chapter 2, the book turns from the image of the steep steps to the image of the retrofit. If the steps symbolize the original design of exclusion, the retrofit represents the afterthought. The ramp bolted on at the side, the accommodation granted only when asked for, the policy tweaked that gestures towards exclusion but never changes the foundation. Dolmage reminds us that this retrofit logic has become the default way higher education responds to disability. It is reactive rather than proactive. And I know this from personal experience designing an entire wing of the liberal arts building. It acknowledges barriers only to patch them, never to dismantle them. And Dolmage situates this retrofit in the history of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is not that old. It was passed when I was in middle school. And it's celebrated as a landmark bill, but it was a compromise from the very beginning. The ADA, as Dolmage shows, was hailed as a civil rights victory, but often worked to stall deeper transformation. It produced thousands of small changes, ramps, curb cuts, extended test times, while allowing the broader architecture of exclusion to remain untouched. In this way, the ADA became a tool of token progress, enough to demonstrate compliance, not enough to reshape the culture. The retrofit makes space at the margins but never opens the front door. It preserves the image of accessibility without shifting the idea from the ideology of ableism. And the retrofit is not meaningless. For many disabled people, a ramp or a curb cut can make the difference between access and exclusion in a particular moment. But the point that he is making in this text is that these adjustments, while essential, too often stop us from imagining more, getting creative. They become the ceiling rather than the floor of our expectations. The university points to them as evidence of fairness, even while students are forced to fight bureaucratic battles, repeat their stories of diagnosis and trauma, and wait for permission slips to enter classrooms already built to keep them out. And for those of us navigating neurodivergence, the retrofit is all too familiar. It is the professor who tells us we can have extra time on the exam, but never considers rewriting that exam in a way that values different kinds of intelligence. It's the classroom website that is technically accessible, but overwhelming to navigate with no thought giving to cognitive load. It is the advisor who says yes to one accommodation, but treats every other new request as a burden, or worse, an insult. The retrofit is always reactive, always framed as a favor, and never as a recognition of our inherent belonging or worth. Yet in naming this pattern, Dolmage gives us power to see the retrofit for what it is and what it means. And when we recognize what it is, it means that we can stop mistaking small allowances and crumbs for justice. We can honor the ramps and the accommodations while still pressing for something more. We can say access is not a patch, it's a principle. Access is not what you give after we fight for it. It's what you build from the very start. And for our Nachos community, this chapter encourages us to reflect on the ways we have internalized the retrofit logic in our own lives. How often have we accepted scraps of access and told ourselves it was enough? How often have we hidden our needs because the process of asking felt too draining, too humiliating, too much like begging? The retrofit shows us why we feel this way. Because the system was not designed with us in mind, and yet our gathering each week is an act of refusal. We refuse to be retrofitted into someone else's design. We are designing anew. And for the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference, this metaphor is just as urgent. We cannot be content with side entrances or marginal accommodation. The conference is not a retrofit. It is a front door flung wide open. A space built from the beginning with our voices at center. By carrying the book's metaphors with us, we strengthen our commitment to building communities where access is not reactive but generative, not grudging but joyful. If steep steps remind us of the long history of exclusion, the retrofit reminds us of the present dangers of settling for too little. Together, they prepare us for the vision that Dolmage turns to next: universal design. The possibility of creating educational spaces where access is not added on, but built in, and not scarce, but abundant. And when we step back from these metaphors in this text of the steep steps and the retrofit, it becomes clear that these are not just about universities or classrooms. They're about the wider world we're living in right now. Think about how many of our public conversations, whether about housing, healthcare, or even democracy, still carry the same architecture of exclusion. There are always gates, always steps, always hoops to jump through, and when people push for access, the response is often retrofit logic, which is token gestures, temporary fixes, the bare minimum. Ramps at back doors of buildings become mirrored in one-time relief checks, half-funded public programs, or performative statements of diversity. And all of these things happen without any real structural or institutional change. The metaphors that Dolmage gives us are not locked in academia. They are blueprints for understanding how exclusion is maintained everywhere. Because what is college designed to do, and what is it meant to prepare you for? A real world. Shocking. And for those of us living as neurodivergent, disabled, or otherwise marginalized people, these metaphors are not abstract. They're lived realities. We know the steep steps of trying to navigate a workplace that prizes stamina over balance. I just saw Jeff Bezos talking about work-life balance, and I chuckled. They weren't sad. Or a healthcare system that requires endless paperwork and doesn't seem to understand the disabilities that it serves. We know that the retrofit of being allowed to participate only if we mask our differences or being offered small accommodations that come with side glances and whispered judgments are not enough. These steps and retrofits drain us because they demand that we constantly prove our worthiness to enter spaces that should already belong to all of us humans. And the author's words name what we feel. The exhaustion of always being asked to adapt to systems that refuse to adapt to us. At the same time, these metaphors give us a way to imagine connection. When we come together in Nachos, we're practicing what it looks like to stop climbing those steep steps alone. We share our stories, our chips of truth, and our tips of survival so that no one has to believe the lie that their struggle is a personal failure. We say to one another, the steps are real. But you're not broken because you find them steep. And the retrofit is real, but you deserve more than patched over access. Together, we create a kind of collective ramp. One built not on grudging compliance, but on warmth, grace, and affirmation. The world we're facing right now is one where people are being told again and again that belonging is conditional. Politicians cut services. Workplaces demand productivity above humanity, and schools push students through narrow pathways that leave many behind. And it's easy to internalize these messages and believe we're falling short. But what Dolmage helps us see is that the problem is not inside of us. The problem is the design of the steps and the limitations of the retrofit. And what Nachos reminds us is that redesign is possible. We can build communities where the table is already set for every kind of brain and body. And this is why the Michigan Disability Conference matters so much this year. It's not a retrofit. It's not an afterthought. It's not a token gesture. It's a gathering where disabled leaders, advocates, and allies are building something new together. So when you attend, speak, or even just sit and listen, you're helping reshape the blueprint. You're helping to shift Michigan away from patchwork access towards genuine empowerment. In this way, our work is not just local, but deeply connected to wider movements across the country and the world. We are part of a growing refusal to accept the steep steps or settle for the retrofit. So the invitation to all of us as Nacho Knots and members of this community is to carry these metaphors with us in our daily lives. Notice where the steep steps are. Pay attention to when you are being offered a retrofit, and then together, imagine the possibilities of something else. Imagine a world where accessibility is not added at the margins, but flows through everything we build. Imagine a world where the table's already set and no one needs to ask for a chair. That imagination is not naive. It's the beginning of a transformation, of an enlightenment. And it's what we practice week after week. When we come together here in our online spaces, it's what we do. The Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference that's happening on October 24th is more than just a date on a calendar. It's a gathering of energy, ideas, and voices from across the state who who are ready to reimagine what disability empowerment and what disability leadership looks like in Michigan. It's a chance for students like you, faculty like me, advocates like all of us, and community leaders, every one of us alike, to come together in the same space and declare the steep steps and the retrofits are not enough. We are building something new, something bold, and something that welcomes every voice and everybody from the beginning. For you as students, this is a rare opportunity. Most of the time, midterms are assignments that come and go, papers that get submitted, graded, and filed away at the best scenario. But this year, we're offering you something very different. Your midterm project can be more than an academic exercise. It can be part of the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference. And that means it can live beyond the classroom. It can be seen by advocates, community organizers, business leaders, educators, and even policy creators. It can start conversations. It can matter. We're inviting you to submit your midterm projects to the Innovation Challenge at the MDEC. And the process is simple. There's a link in our Google Classroom to enter your project. Only my students can enter. You can submit individually, you can pair up with a partner, or form a team of 3. And this is your chance to put your ideas out into the world, to test them, to showcase them, and maybe even to win prizes, or even more, the interest of a future investor. I see you, engineers. I see you, future engineers. Come on. But more importantly, it's your chance to make your work ripple outward, to let it have weight beyond the grade book. Think about the difference this makes. Instead of producing a paper that only 1 or 2 people will ever read, or a video that only I will ever see, you can produce something that sits at the heart of a statewide conversation, lives in the minds of the people who make our laws. Instead of closing a book on your assignment after it's graded, you can watch it spark ideas in others, inspire conversations, and perhaps even shape the future of how disability and neurodivergence are understood and dealt with in the state of Michigan. And that's the power of connecting your midterm to this conference. The NACHOS podcast is also part of this larger picture. Each week, we share neuroaffirming stories and strategies with an audience that reaches well beyond our campus and our classroom. And by tuning in, by sharing episodes, or even by participating, you become part of that ripple effect. You become part of a growing archive of voices that insist on belonging, on affirmation, and on joy. The podcast and the conference work hand in hand. One amplifies stories, the other gathers people. Both are spaces where your voice can matter. So here's the invitation. Don't let your midterm end when you turn it in. Let it begin there. Take the step of submitting your project to the Innovation Challenge. Let your work have a life of its own. Let it be seen. Let it be celebrated. Let it be carried forward by others who are eager for fresh ideas and young, new perspectives. Classmates are already signing up. I think there are 7 or 8 more spots left. You'll not only earn credit for your class, but you'll also earn the knowledge that your work traveled beyond the classroom and into the heart of a movement. Imagine standing in a room at a conference surrounded by community leaders, educators, advocates, and knowing that your work is part of what's being celebrated and discussed. Your ideas, who you are. Imagine seeing your ideas taken seriously by people who are building programs, shaping policies, and creating communities. Imagine the feeling of knowing that what you created as a student became part of something larger, something lasting. That is what makes this opportunity and this offer, it's what makes it great. So take it seriously. Take it as an act of self-affirmation, and community building. Use the link in the Google Classroom to submit your midterm project for the Innovation Challenge. Do it for the chance to win prizes, yes, for the glory. But more than that, do it for your chance to make your work matter beyond the classroom. Do it for the chance to take what you are learning here and let it become part of a larger story of empowerment in this state. Alongside the conference and the Innovation Challenge, I also want to remind you that our community doesn't end when this class is over or when this event wraps up. We have built spaces where these conversations can continue, grow, and support throughout this semester. I'll be updating you, but I've got lots of upcoming speaking engagements in Genesee County and Wayne County and beyond. So remember that the Nachos podcast is one of those spaces where you can find growth and support. Every Monday, a new episode drops at noon, and it's designed to be a resource for you, to encourage, to affirm, and to remind you that neurodivergence is not something to hide, but something to honor. Listening each week keeps you connected not only to the ideas we discuss in class, but also to a larger community of voices wrestling with the same questions and celebrating the same truths. We also have our Discord channel, which is an ongoing heartbeat of this community. That's where we share announcements, reminders, and resources, but it's also where you can connect with each other in a more informal way. It's a space to ask questions, exchange ideas, vent a little when the week feels overwhelming, and find encouragement when you need it. Think of it as a virtual version of our table, where every brain and every body and every voice has a seat and matters. So if you haven't joined us yet, I encourage you to dive in. It's an easy way to stay up to date and stay supported. The podcast, the Discord, and the classroom all flow into one another. There are different entry points into the same community, a community that is being built around affirming who you are, encouraging your growth, and giving you the tools to thrive both inside and outside of the classroom. These are not just extras or add-ons. They're part of the core of what we're creating together. They're how we practice what Dolmage challenges us to do, not settle for retrofits, but imagine a fuller, more generous design for learning and living. So remember, too, that this community is as strong as the people in it and that your participation matters. Your voice matters. Every time you listen to an episode, share a post, drop a message in Discord, or bring your perspective to class, you're adding to the collective energy that makes this possible. We're creating something that is bigger than any one of us alone. And that's why I keep encouraging you to show up, encouraging you to stay connected, and encouraging you to lean into these opportunities. Together, through this podcast, through the Discord, through the classroom, and through events like the MDEC, we're weaving a network of support and a community of empowerment that extends far beyond one semester or one place. This is about more than grades or assignments. It's about building habits of connection, affirmation, and advocacy that you can carry with you wherever you go. As we come to the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to trace the path we've walked together. We began with Tolkien's reminder that none of us choose the times we live in. Frodo wished it could have been otherwise, but Gandalf acknowledged the same longing, but knew the heart of the matter. What matters most is how we respond to the time we are given. The wisdom that is learned or given in this quote is as true for Middle Earth as it is for the world we inhabit today. And when we turn to J. Timothy Dolmage's metaphors of steep steps through the retrofits from academic ableism, the steep steps showed us how exclusion is not accidental, but designed in the very architecture of higher education, and by extension, into much of the society around us. The retrofit showed us how small fixes and side entrances may offer temporary relief, but rarely challenge the foundations that keep exclusion alive. Both metaphors sharpen our vision. They help us see that when we struggle, when we feel pushed out, it's not a reflection of our inadequacy. It's evidence of systems built without us in mind. And naming this truth is the first act of liberation. Together, we also explored how these ideas are not limited to campus life. They echo in our healthcare systems, in our workplaces, in our communities. Too often, we are offered retrofits instead of redesigns, token accommodations instead of true belonging. And yet, each time we gather here in Nachos, we practice another way. We create a community where our voices are centered, where our differences are affirmed, and where belonging is not something to be earned, but something we start with. We also connected this to the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference, a place where these ideas leap off the page and into action. By submitting your projects, by showing up, by sharing your perspectives, you're stepping into that wider movement. Your midterms don't have to end as assignments. They can begin as contributions to a larger conversation about access, empowerment, and design. This is how we transform the retrofit into a front door and the steep staircase into a wide, welcoming table. So what did we take with us this week? First, that steps are not our fault. Second, that we do not have to settle for retrofits. And third, that when we come together, whether here on the podcast, in the community, in the classroom, or at the MDEC, we're building something different. We're deciding in the time that has been given us to use our voices, to use our creativity, and to use our presence to imagine and build a more inclusive world. So here's the discussion question for you this week. Where do you see steep steps or retrofits in your own life? And what would it look like to redesign those spaces for true belonging? This is the first step in your midterm. I want you to look at where do you see steep steps or retrofits in your life, and what would it look like to redesign those spaces for true belonging? Share your thoughts in the comments, in the chat, in the YouTube. Your perspective matters, and hearing from each other is how we keep learning and growing as a community. So to repeat, where do you see steep steps or retrofits in your own life, and what would it look like to redesign those spaces for true belonging? As always, Nacho Knots, I want to remind you to extend to yourself the same grace you so freely extend others. When you come face to face with steep steps this week, whether they're literal or hidden in policies, expectations, or even in your own self-doubt, remember that those steps were built without you in mind. They do not define your worth, and you're not failing when the climb feels too steep. The failure is in the design, not in you. When you're offered small accommodations, take them if they help, but never forget that you are worthy of more than retrofits. Access is not a favor. It's not charity. It is your right. You deserve not just side doors, but front doors. Not scraps of inclusion, but a table set with your place already waiting. You belong fully and without question. And when the world feels heavy, as it will, it's okay to retreat to your safe texts, your safe music, your safe spaces, your safe food. Like me returning to Tolkien, you can return to what steadies you. Comfort is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's one of the ways we remind ourselves that even in uncertain times, we are allowed to rest, we are allowed to regroup, and we are allowed to draw strength from the familiar. So as you step into the week ahead, carry these truths with you. First, your story matters, not just to you, not just to your grades, but to the people who will hear it and feel less alone because you were brave enough to share it. Your voice has weight. Your words have power, and your presence is already changing the space you are in right now. Secondly, your projects and your ideas can ripple outward. What you are working on is not just classroom work. It can be the spark that shifts how someone thinks, how a community organizes, and how a movement grows. Never underestimate the reach of what you can create. It may go farther than you even know. Thirdly, remember that you're never climbing alone. Even when the steps feel steep, even when the retrofit feels too small, you do not have to make the climb in isolation. You're part of a fellowship. This community walks with you, sits beside you, and celebrates the moments you rest as much as the moments when you rise. So let that sink in. You are held in belonging. You have my sword. You have my axe and my bow. Not because you worked harder, not because you masked better, not because you earned it, but simply because you are here, and that's enough. So until next time, thank you for choosing to spend this part of your time here. Let's keep deciding together how to use those days and hours we're given. Let's keep choosing affirmation and compassion and connection, because that's how we climb. Not towards exclusion, not towards exhaustion, but towards joy. True, real, human joy. Remember, Nacho Knots, you've got this.